Good morning, good afternoon, eventually good evening, depending where you are. I'm Isolina BOTO from COLEAD. Thank you very much for attending this session today. I know you are still joining, but it's our OECD COLEAD Fruits and Vegetables Industry series. And today we have session number 8 on a very important topic, which is, and a complex one, of course, which is market challenges and geopolitical issues affecting trade flows in fruits and vegetables. As you know, these series were launched together with OECD in 2021 at the occasion of the International Year of Fruits and Vegetables. And we really wanted to discuss online with policy, research, operators, what the markets look like, of course, in the fruit and vegetable industry, understanding better the sector, and how it contributes to sustainable production, consumption, trade, and so on. We, of course, want to also promote and recognize and stress the contribution of fruits and vegetables industry to healthy and nutritious diets. And we, in each of the sessions, we showcase as well innovations, innovative private sector operators across the European Union, as well as southern countries, and what we can learn from those operators who are dealing, daily with many issues. So today, of course, it's a complex but very interesting. We all are aware of just by reading the newspaper or watching TV what's going on at the geopolitical level, how it can affect the food sector, and of course even more the fruits and vegetables, which especially when it's on the fresh, fresh part. We will hear different. We cannot go deep into each of the topics, each one. Actually, some of them, like climate change and so on, we already deal in specific sessions. Others will come, but we will learn a lot today as well. And thank in advance, of course, the speakers, but also the interpreters. And for the interpretation, we have English and French. Please choose your language in the globe you have at the bottom of your screen. You also know that it's recorded. It will be shared as well as with all the presentations of today after the session. And you also have the chat function where you can put the questions and of course any contribution, insights, and so on. So thank you very much. So without major delay, let's start. I will not do an introduction because we are very qualified people to do so. So without major delay, I give the floor to José BRAMBILA-MACIAS, who is from the OECD, from the Trade and Agriculture Directorate, from the Agriculture Codes and Schemes at OECD, who is also our counterpart in organizing those sessions. You are, of course, specialized on the topic. Before that, you were also a researcher and an expert at FAO and many other organizations. And I thank you as well. I take the opportunity to thank you very much for this collaboration that goes actually between OECD and COLEAD much beyond these sessions. But I thank you very much for the interaction and for the support of yourself and of your colleagues all the time. José, please.
Thank you, Isolina, and welcome to everybody to this 8th session of these joint webinars of OECD and COLEAD. As Isolina mentioned, the idea of these webinars is to discuss trends, legislation, market opportunities for fruit and vegetable trade. We will always do that with our guest experts that guide us through all the challenges, all the issues that are affecting the fruit and vegetables trade. I want to thank, of course, COLEAD, Jeremy and Isolina and all the team for organizing these webinars. It's COLEAD who takes the lion's share here organizing all the meetings. So we are really grateful for them and to being able to reach all the audience and be able to discuss with farmers, with traders, and all those who are interested in fruit and vegetable trade. I want to thank also quickly our experts today. So Laura, Marcel, Hans-Willem, and Simon for taking the time today to speak to us and to share your insights on what's going on with all these geopolitical challenges that we are living these last years and how they're affecting the fruit and vegetable trade and what are your insights and your solutions on how to address all these challenges. I pass the floor now to give back the floor to colleague Jeremy.
Thank you very much, José, and good morning to everybody, and welcome. I'll be very short. I'll start by thanking, of course, the fellow panelists here today for your time. I'm thanking also the participants for being with us for this eighth session, and of course OECD for our fruitful continued collaboration that, as Isolina mentioned, goes beyond these series. So COLEAD, we are a not-for-profit private sector association. Our main mission is to implement activities, make sure that the agricultural sector is in a better position to contribute to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. In order to do so, we design and manage projects and programs who usually have a common denominator in terms of specific objectives they're seeking to achieve. And so usually there's a very strong angle on facilitating access to markets, being international, regional, or domestic. In order to facilitate this access to markets, our work is usually organized around providing information on what the markets require, what's happening on the market from a regulatory, from a trade perspective. Then it's about strengthening skills and competencies of the people at different stages of value chains, and it's about leveraging networks. So that's really in a nutshell our activities and how they are organized. And it's clear that today's session comes at a very good time. I could have argued that we could have had it a couple of years ago. It's still extremely relevant. We've been since Brexit and even slightly before that in a kind of continuum of changes that have deeply affected, of course, with varying degrees, but which have deeply affected value chain operators, and that has been compounded, of course, with the ongoing impacts of climate change, especially in the fruit and veg sector at production level. And so through our different programs, such as Fit for Market Plus, a major focus now is how to increase the resilience in light of all these changes. And so there are the kind of three big steps when changes emerge. We have the kind of crisis survival mode, then we have the adaptation, then we have the transformation. A lot of our work is more kind of the adaptation, and I would say one of the strategic orientations probably for our organization for the years to come is to also move more on the kind of transformational side of things in order to be able to, independently from the nature of the change being the disruption or the geopolitical change, putting operators in the best possible position to, in the long run, be able to cope with these changes. And of course, at the heart in what we believe is that people are key, and hence that's our core focus at COLEAD, growing people and working on the competencies and skills, knowledge, know-how. So yeah, very eager to listen to today's session, and wishing all of you fruitful exchanges. Thank you, Isolina. Back to you.
Thank you very much, José. Thank you very much, Jeremy, for the introduction. So without major delay, because we will see all the different aspects in the presentation in the interest of time, we will have a presentation now in French.
I can see that we have many French-speaking friends in friends in particular in Africa. So hello to all of you. I would like to introduce Laura DEMURTAS, who is an expert in external relations at Club DEMETER. She doesn't simply talk about agricultural and agri-food ecosystem, but she also focuses on global issues and cross-sector dynamics. So the intersectoral dynamics is something which is of the essence here. My colleagues will be introduced each and every time they will take the floor. In the meantime, Laura, you have the floor and you will give us your point of view from a global perspective. And thank you for joining us from Paris. Yes, thank you and hello everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. I will be sharing my slides. I hope that you can see the slides properly. Absolutely. So I am not a specialist of fruit and vegetables, actually, but I will be talking about the geopolitics of global food security. And so I will give you an overall picture of geopolitics. And there are three main challenges: safety, sustainability, and health. Why safety? Well, because agriculture and food are what bring peace to the world. And we know that without peace in the world, we won't be able to have trade exchanges across the world. And so we need that. We need peace to have proper exchanges. Of course, there are other variables such as climate change, demographic growth. We have 2 billion people more since 2000, and there will be even 2 more billions by 2050. And so that means that with the same means, we need to produce the same amount of food to feed all these people. So maybe we won't be able to produce the same way as we used to because we don't have another planet to feed all those people. So stability is important for all the agricultural produce. The second axis I was telling you is sustainability. It means that we need not just peace, but we need to be able to keep going. So we need innovation, we need new means of production in order to try to respond to the growth of the growth for food demand. So that means that we will ask producers and consumers to repair the planet. Tools can be verticalization of agriculture, but it all depends actually on the countries. Some countries have less resources, so verticalization will be of the essence. For European countries, verticalization will be a supplement to the existing tools. But the issue of resources is essential. So bioeconomy or circular economy is essential to reduce food waste and agricultural waste. The third pillar, the third challenge is at the end of this century is health, better living and better aging thanks to food or nutrition. So we know that some people don't have access to proper food and they often eat the same things day in, day out. So we will need to try to produce food and give access to food or to food safety to all these people. What is interesting is that in the next few years, in 74, there will be more than 2 billion people who will be aged more than 75 years of age. So this is just to set the picture. Now, in this slide, I'm giving you more details about world trade. Since the beginning of the century, the world trade has quadrupled almost, rising from 7 billion in 2000 to 23, almost 24 billion in 2023. Trade represents almost 9% of global exchanges, and the sea is the preferred route for world trade. So we need to take into consideration, and you can see here the development of world trade on this slide, and you can see that trade of agricultural products has multiplied by 4 over the last few years. Some countries have been the main producers, such as China and the US, but let's keep in mind that world trade is also impacted by geopolitical factors, climate change, of course, boycotts, so that's pure politics, and Russia last week put a ban on fruit and vegetables from Europe. There are tariff barriers and health barriers. We've seen this with different conflicts in the Ukraine, in the Middle East, and in Sudan. And it all depends also on logistics, especially for fruit and vegetables. This is essential, especially with the cold chain. It's not easy to have cold chain everywhere around the globe, but this is key for safety, for food safety, and to exchange and transport some products, you need food chain. That is essential to global trade. What is also important is that fruit and vegetable trade represents roughly 45% of all agri-food products traded around the world. In 2023, we had about $235 billion in terms of the value of exchange. Let's not underestimate fruit and vegetables in that, multiplied by 5 since 2001 and multiplied by 4 for vegetables since 2001. So the market is growing. We don't just want quantity, but we also want quality of product for our health. We need to take into account the habits of consumers. Consumers always want more. They want and expect products which are better for our health. They're trying to reduce animal protein consumption, giving preference to vegetable protein, and they try to reduce also processed food, giving preference to more seasoning and seasonal products. But there are problems also in the sector of fruit and vegetables, especially because of the stress related to water, tensions related to waters. There are areas that are experiencing terrible drought, and so it changes our way of producing fruits and vegetables. Because of the increase in demand and because of the increase of the world population, we need to find solutions that will allow to have as much and better. And so I'm giving you here the example of vertical farms. This is important, but it also depends on where you are on the globe. In Asia, Middle East, this might be the solution because they don't have that much water and they don't have that many possibilities to work the land on the outside of urban areas. In the US, this is going to be another means, a supplement to other means. To give you an idea of the importance of geopolitics, let's take the example of orange. This is a product that you will find which is wanted everywhere around the world. It's important for global trade in terms of processing into orange juice. You have some countries which play a very important role, such as the EU, and it's important for the trade balance. Look at some other countries of the EU, banana, apples and fresh tomatoes, for instance. Some of my colleagues will probably give you a more appropriate analysis of each of these products. But it's interesting to see the place of the EU as a producer, exporter, and importer, not to be underestimated. Now, I will also show you a slide about the Mediterranean area. Let's not underestimate the need to develop and continue relationships with our neighbors. Monsieur Macron is in Rabat today with my own director to discuss mainly food safety. And so we also need to consider the Mediterranean countries, which ensure 20% of world trade. This is the example of Morocco and Turkey, which are two countries which are very important for trade with the EU and Africa. There are some key factors, actually 3 factors, which we need to take collective actions. It's coherence, consistency, and trust. So confidence. It is the importance and the appropriateness of production. We need to consider the resources, the cost of production. We need to make sure this is good for the producers, for the planet, and for the consumers. And then we also need to look at the appropriateness of these produce in a geopolitical context with climate change, logistic, and all the difficulties surrounding the agricultural market. You have here a few examples of things which are developing, such as eco greenhouses. We have the challenge of climate change, so plastic packaging, organic products, also integration of certain novelties. You need to educate not just the customers, but also the producers. And you need to have a good consumption also. I will conclude here because I believe the time has elapsed, but I'm here to answer any of your countries. Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation, reminding us of the challenges and you mentioned the necessity of sustainability. You talked about the importance of access to natural resources. This is important for the planet. The cost, the price, equity, fairness along the value chain. This is particularly important. Thank you for mentioning that. Some of you have mentioned the fact that interpretation is not working. Actually, it does work, but you need to click on the icon interpretation, click on it, select languages and the languages of your choice. You will be able to have interpretation in French and in English. And you can also indicate your questions in the chat.
So without a major delay, we give the floor now to, of course, a colleague of José and from OECD. Thank you very much for facilitating one of the policy analysts from the Trade and Agriculture Directorate at OECD. One of the leading persons in the team responsible for the Outlook, OECD FAO Agriculture Outlook report, which we always, at COLEAD, and not only, I'm sure all of you consult very importantly, because research and data is critical. Huh? We mentioned that in each of the topics. It's very, very important that we take decisions, so we just understand topics based on data. So, Dr. ADENÄUER, you are, of course, in that team, and you are also focusing on cereal, biofuel markets, You are interested, of course, on global land markets as well, climate change mitigation, and you have been before being at OECD also a senior researcher at the Institute for Food and Resource Economics of the University of Bonn, and you are specialized on global agriculture sector modeling. So the floor is yours. I thank you again for being with us today. And I put the link to the OECD, I mean the outlook, the latest one that gives a 10-year perspective.
Dr. Thank you very much for this introduction, and I'm happy to be here and share our main findings of our current edition of the OECD FAO Agriculture Outlook, which is said is an annual publication that we do together with secretariats at FAO. And as you also know, it doesn't have a big focus on fruits and vegetables, but since a few years, we have at least some mentioning of these important products in our outlook as well. And in the next slide, you can see where we come from. It has been a long journey from the first outlook in 1995, the first joint edition with the FAO in 2005, and our current 20th anniversary edition. I myself took part in about 14 of them, I think, and mostly looked at the grain markets, but also at biofuels and cotton sometimes. And the scope has grown steadily, as you can see here. But if you miss fruits and vegetables, this is because we never included them with full market balance like we do for the other products that you see here and that have always been in, like the main ones, grain, oilseeds, sugar, cane, sugar beet, and those, crops which take most of the land. And it's also important in our whole process that we get feedback from market experts, political experts, and industry representatives, such as the International Grain Council or the International Dairy Federation. And we include this expert knowledge throughout the whole process. There's a model behind our outlook, but there's much more expert knowledge that drives our projections. And we also have an important annual meeting for this, our group on commodity markets, where we collect this feedback. We also organize something that we call the World Outlook Conference every year, where we exchange ideas with other institutions in the Outlook business. And last but not least, we're giving webinars and reach out in seminars like this here today, which is an important inspiration for us for our next round of Outlook. Here I give you the key messages of this year's edition. First, the emerging economies have increasingly driven global agriculture and fishery market developments over the last 20 years, and they are expected to continue to do so over the next decade. But the role of China in driving global food and agriculture consumption is waning, whilst India and Southeast Asia are expected to gain influence, driven by their growing urban populations and increasing affluence. And we have calorie intake, which is expected to increase by 7% in middle-income countries, largely due to greater consumption of staples, livestock products, and fats. And the calorie intake in low-income countries will grow only by 4%, which is slow to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal target of zero hunger by 2030. The agricultural greenhouse gas emission intensities are expected to decline, which is a good message, as growth will be based on productivity improvements rather than additional cultivated land or livestock herd expansion. Although the direct emissions from agriculture are still on an increasing path in our outlook, and they increased by 5% compared to today. And we did a scenario where we tried to halve food loss and waste, and this had showed the potential to reduce global agriculture GHG emissions by 4%, and the number of undernourishment people by 153 million by the year of 2030. Of course, well-functioning international agriculture commodity markets will remain important for global food security, as 20% of calories are traded and rural livestock can benefit from participation in markets and global agri-food value chains. And a slight fall in real international reference prices for main agricultural commodities is projected over the next 10 years. but this may not be reflected in local retail food prices. And I have a few charts to underpin some of these messages. First, if we look back at the last 2 decades, here we can see that emerging markets have increasingly driven the development of global agriculture and fishery markets. If you look at global consumption here, the share of OECD member countries has declined significantly over the past 20 years, but the importance of other countries such as China, especially in meat and vegetable oil, or India in the dairy product sector, or the Asian countries in general, has increased significantly. So how we project these numbers into the future depends strongly on the macroeconomic developments of the different countries that we take from other sources into account. And here you can see in blue and yellow how gross domestic product and population have grown over the last 10 years. And these are average annual growth rates that we see here, and what we assume for the next 10 years in black and gray. When it comes to the population, you can see that in all the regions we have shown here, the future growth rates are below the rates of the last 10 years. And the population in China is even declining. This initially has a slowing effect on food demand, of course, or on the demand growth. When it comes to GDP, we have a mixed picture. Global growth rates increase, but not everywhere. And we must not forget that some economic shocks, not at least the COVID, are implicit in the growth rates of the last 10 years. So there's some natural adjustment from those lows happening. And here we see again that over the past 2 decades, China's share of world's additional calories consumed has been very large due to the economic progress in the country and rising per capita consumption. But this proportion is expected to be significantly lower over the next 10 years, not at least because of the declining population that we saw before. On the other hand, India and Sub-Saharan Africa grew more slowly than their share of world population, but India's per capita consumption is to expect to grow faster than the global average in the coming decade, increasing India's importance, of course. Sub-Saharan Africa is expected to see an increase in per capita consumption in line with the global average. Here we see how the daily average calorie consumption is made up and how it will change over the next 10 years, broken down by income group. In the high income countries, on the left, not much changes here, neither in total consumption nor in the composition of calories. So there's this per capita, right? So the total consumption, of course, increases with population, but the per capita is very flat for the high income countries. The latter is generally true, but in the other income groups, total food consumption is increasing. The black dots that you see here indicate the minimum daily calorie requirements as published by the FAO. And even in low-income countries, this is below consumption. But since these average values are based on distributions, a large part of the population consumes less than this minimum. And the projected increase is not strong enough to make any significant difference here. This is one of the few graphs in our publication that contain information on fruits and vegetables. So on the diet side, we cover it. And you see, of course, that in caloric terms, the shares of fruits and vegetables in the daily average diet is relatively small. But this picture changes when we go to the actual product weights. Then, as you know, the shares are much more important in the annual intake picture. Even more in the upper income classes than in the lower ones. As mentioned before, food loss and waste is another big issue. We have had estimates on this in our database since last year. And here you can see the importance of the individual products in the overall waste and losses. And on the left, in weight proportions, you can see vegetables in blue, grains in orange, and fruits in gray. They together account for around 75% of all losses and waste. And if you look to the right, fruits and vegetables only play a minor role again in caloric terms, because their calorie density is much lower than with the grains, vegetable oils, or meats, where their proportions increase significantly. You could also represent the whole thing in production values, for example, and you would get a different picture again, where, for example, milk and meat products would be given higher weights. And as mentioned before, we have done this scenario where we were halving food loss and waste with a certain cost attached to it that is borne by the consumer through higher price markups, basically. And in this scenario, agricultural emissions would decrease by 4% and actual food intake would increase, especially in the poorer countries. So that looks on a first glance as a win-win situation, but this excludes agricultural producers, these pictures, who would have to bear a large part of the costs due to sharply falling producer prices. We have since a few years further deep dive, not too deep, but of two groups of fruits that get further attention in the outlook. For vegetables, that's it. We don't go deeper into vegetables, but for the fruits, particular bananas and some other tropical fruits, we have a dedicated section in the outlook. And here I give you some of the information that we give in this chapter. For bananas, for example, the current market situation in 2023, global banana trade recovered with exports reaching 9.2 million tons, though weather disruptions impacted key exporters differently, benefiting Ecuador and Guatemala, but hurting Colombia, Mexico, and others. Reduced fertilizer use and plant diseases, especially banana fusarium, wild TR4, caused production losses in several countries, and strong import demand in the EU and the US led to price increases of 8 to 15%, helped by lower freight costs and favorable exchange rates with a positive outlook for 2024. So that we always have a kind of this current market situation part, and then a part which looks into the future, where we see global banana production to grow from 135 million ton to 160 million ton by 2033, which is always 10 years in the future, with moderate annual growth of 1.5%, driven mainly by population dynamics, particularly in Asia, where India will lead with 43 million tons. And we have Latin America and the Caribbean's production, which is expected to reach 37 million tons by 2033, fueled by rising demand from the EU, US, and China, with key exporters like Ecuador, Guatemala benefiting if weather and disease risks are managed. Global banana exports are projected to reach 22.6 million tons by 2033, with increased demand supporting growth, especially in the European Union, UK, and from Africa, led by the Ivory Coast. And here you can see the export picture in terms of a chart of the Latin American region. And you see that very visually that Ecuador is by far the largest banana exporter and will continue to be so. Colombia, Costa Rica, and Guatemala have similar export levels and have switched positions in the past. And for the next 10 years, we see Guatemala in the lead here, followed by Costa Rica and Colombia. Then we have these four other tropical fruit groups mentioned more explicitly: mangoes, mangosteens, and guavas in 2023 had seen an export growth by 1% to 2.3 million tons, driven by higher exports of mangosteen from Thailand and mangoes from Brazil, Peru, Mexico, with mangoes accounting for 85% of shipments. For pineapples, global exports grew by 4% to 3.2 million tons in 2023, driven by favorable weather and lower freight costs in Costa Rica, the largest exporter, with shipments primarily to the US and EU. For avocados, global exports surged by 20% to 3 million tons in 2023, led by strong supply growth from Mexico, Peru, and Kenya, alongside with import demand in the US and the EU. And for papayas, global export contracted by 3%, with Mexico's exports declining due to adverse weather, while US demand, the largest importer, remains solid. And same here, an outlook for mangoes, mangosteens, and guavas. The global production is projected to grow by 3.6% annually, reaching 86 million tons, led by strong domestic demand in Asia, especially in India. Exports are set to rise to 3 million tons, driven by demand from US, China, and EU. For pineapples, production is expected to grow 1.5% annually to 35 million tons, with Asia remaining the largest producer and exports projected to reach 3.6 million tons, mainly driven by demand from the US, EU, and China. And for avocados, production is projected to grow 3.5% annually, reaching 40 million tons by 2033, with Latin America leading. Exports are expected to reach 4.3 million tons, making avocados the most traded tropical fruit by 2025, driven by demand from the US and the EU. Then we have papayas. Production is set to grow 1.5% annually to 17 million tons by 2033, primarily for domestic consumption in Asia. Exports are expected to reach nearly 0.4 million tons, with growth hindered by the fruit's perishability, but aided by innovations in transport and technology. And here again, one chart that shows global exports of these four major tropical fruits, which summarizes the trade prospects, where you can clearly see the rise of the avocado trade over the past 2 decades, which is projected to continue over the next decade. Also, mango trade has a continuous strong growth, whilst for pineapples and papaya, it's less of growth that we project here. And with that, I'm closing my presentation with giving you the contact possibilities, so you can reach out to these 2 contact addresses or to me directly if you have any questions or inquiries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. ADENÄUER. A very, very interesting presentation with research findings, data. Of course, the key importance, we know it, but we don't know the data behind of the emerging economies, and how those even the trends within those are changing as well towards more India and so on. Thank you very much for stressing what we do a lot at COLEAD, OECD, the food and loss waste all along the chain, you know, from the post-production to the final consumer, as any of us is, because it can change. Thank you for reminding that halving that proportion will just change the life of 153 million people, in addition, of course, to the climate change, you know, reduction. And we are promoting always more production and more trade. But if we lose, you know, those levels of food waste, I mean, it's absolutely nonsense. And thank you very much as well for all the dietary and the calorie intake consumption, and all how those also dictate some of the changes. So I really, it's very rich presentation, so it's very difficult to, of course, summarize them again, but please feel free to put some of the questions or insights already in the chat. After these 2 presentations, thank you again, giving some of the research, you know, and trends and findings. We are going now to a bit the second part, which is insights from the operators, fruits and vegetable operators in Europe, in this case in the Netherlands, and in Africa, in Tanzania, and looking on how those are, of course, impacted by these changes, but also how they, you know, navigate the changes, how they adapt, and how they manage still to succeed. So without major delay, we go to Holland. Hans-Willem van der Waal is the CEO of AgroFair, a company based in Holland. The company is really a pioneer of the fair trade and organic banana. Hans-Willem joined AgroFair in 2008, and previously he had worked for 6 years in Africa, especially in Burkina Faso. He established a fresh mango export company, which was the largest of its kind, which specialized at the time in organic and fair trade. And since he became the CEO of AgroFair, the company grew to around 100 million sales of mainly fair trade and organic bananas, which are sourced from small grower cooperatives in different countries like Peru, Ecuador, Dominican Republic, and so on. So you are also very active, of course, in European countries as well as Australia, Asia, and so on. So, of course, based on this experience, really, you have a very, very deep knowledge of the challenges, the opportunities of the organic banana industry, the role of the small farmers, very key when you talk about fair trade and organic sectors, and of course, how those can shape, future development towards more sustainable production, be socially, environmentally, and of course, price, as it was mentioned at the beginning also of this discussion. So thank you very much for being with us. We value it very much, knowing how busy you are. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Isolina. Thank you. And good morning to you. Yes, my name is Hans-Willem, and we are here in Rotterdam in the center of the fruit and vegetable business. I will show you a bit. This is the center of Western Europe fruit and vegetable business. It's a little bit like Rungis in Paris. And well, you see here all the containers with bananas and mangoes and so coming in. In the background, you see the headquarters of the largest fruit and vegetable cooperative in the Netherlands. It's called, what's it called? The Greenery. And so our company is here in the center of the Rotterdam fruit business. So I think that's enough. It's all gray and dark here in Rotterdam. A slight drizzle, but the work goes on. So let me share my little presentation with you. Here we go. So it was already said, yes, we do bananas. We are the pioneer of the fair trade banana. Our sales are around 100 million. It was a little bit less than 100 million, and that was due to adverse weather conditions, something that we had never experienced before. So that was last year. I will say some more things about that in a few seconds. 6 million boxes per year. That means about 5,500 refrigerated containers. The containers that you saw just now outside here, outside our office. We do a lot of fair trade, but also organic and also conventional, mostly Rainforest Alliance certified bananas. We also do some Bio Suisse and Demeter. That's special types of organic bananas. And in the past, we used to import also mangoes and pineapples, citrus, but we are now concentrating on bananas. So that's the type of fruit that we know best and that we have most experience with. Our farmers, our suppliers, they own 33% of our shares. So whenever we make a profit, and usually we make some profit, then our suppliers also participate in the value that we add by our activities in Europe. As said, many of our producers are small producer cooperatives in Peru and Ecuador especially, but we also work with many private plantations. We have one workers cooperative in Panama, by the way, so that's a plantation, but it's owned by the workers. It's quite an interesting story and an interesting model. And on this nice picture, you see a little bit what you already know, of course, how the bananas, how the value chain of the bananas is designed. Bananas, they grow in Latin America. And yeah, as I already said, they are shipped in refrigerated containers, brought to our warehouse in Rotterdam or in any other European ports. So we work also with arrivals in Antwerp, in Italy, in Hamburg, Sweden. And from there, it is transported to customers' warehouses where it is ripened and sold to the supermarkets, because supermarkets is the major outlet for bananas and for many other fruits. Our customers are all over Europe, as was said, but also in Asia, increasingly in Asia and in Oceania, New Zealand especially, not in Australia, because Australia does not import bananas. It's forbidden. They have their own bananas. And production is coming from the countries that you see here on the left of your screen. Central and South American countries. We used to do a little bit of citrus in South Africa as well, and some mango from India. That's why they are on the map. Good. Now about the challenges. I'm not. I will send you the text later, but instead of looking at my writings, I'd rather look at some pictures that illustrate what I wanted to say. So I have some challenges and some responses. That's basically the structure of what I wanted to say. The challenges, we see geopolitical shocks, we see shocks, climate change shocks, we have labor problems in our productions, and we see increasing regulation. Those are the four most important issues. So starting with the climate change, we see a decreasing volume, I think it was said just now, and also a decreasing quality of bananas and increasing pathogen pressure because of different weather phenomena, different weather events. Sometimes there is too much water and sometimes there is too little water. It's always an issue. So this is a picture of last year in Peru, where normally there is very little rainfall. That is why it is such a good area for organic bananas that are produced under irrigation. But this time there was so much rainfall caused by the La Nina or the El Nino effect that many plantations, they were inundated, they were drowned, they suffered a lot. And then it has an effect on, even if the plantations survive, it has an effect on banana production for months to come, with bananas turning ripe more quickly, production not being available, and so on. But we also sometimes suffer from low rainfall. This is a problem in Dominican Republic, but this is also a problem for transport. All bananas and other fruits from below the Panama Canal, they have to be transported through the canal or over the railway. Last year, there was so little rainfall that the Panama Canal could not operate properly because the canal, because it is higher than the sea, it needs to be fed by rainwater, by rainfall. And for lack of rain, the level of the canal was low, and that was why there was a limit on the number of ships that could pass, and that was also a problem that we had that affected us slightly. We saw the effect of geopolitical crises, shocks affecting energy costs, and energy is everywhere. Energy is and oil prices are an important part of the transport costs. There will be no bananas in Europe if they're not transported by sea. Ships will not sail if there is no oil to propel them. And fertilizer cannot be produced without energy. This is what you see here is an organic fertilizer, but we also do non-organic bananas, and they all need to be fertilized with nitrogen fertilizer. And the prices of all types of fertilizer, I think they doubled or tripled. And as we are working with producers and with customers on fixed prices for a year, in fact, the producer cannot protect herself against shocks in the input costs by passing it on to the customer. So they have to absorb it one way or another. And if they can't, they will just reduce the use of inputs. And that is exactly what happened. I think it was also said before, fertilizer consumption decreased. And yeah, the effect is that I think we are even today, we're still dealing with the effects of fertilizer, decrease of fertilizer consumption the year before last year. The speed with which plantations recovered after fertilization was back to normal. That took much more time than most people had expected, and that caused also a shortage of bananas, and a shortage for us and also for our customers. That means also that we'll talk about with the responses. Another thing is that bananas and many other fruits, they need to be produced. Of course, they grow on trees, but they do not come automatically in boxes, and they do not arrive automatically on your doorstep. So there is a lot of manual work involved for harvesting, for packing, and well, you may think, how difficult can it be to put a banana in a box? But I can assure you, banana is a sensitive piece of fruit, like many other fruits, and you need some skills to do it. And labor in fruit production is not the best paid. They are not the best paid jobs in developing countries. So people, this is for instance in the Dominican Republic, people, they come and start working, but if they can start working in the fruit industry, but if they can find a better job, for instance in construction or in the service industry, then they will do that. And then yeah, there is a high turnover of labor, and also the skills that they have built up, they disappear. That is also something that we find back in sometimes in a lack of quality, or in the wrong deliveries of goods. Another obstacle that we see is the tightening of, especially of European regulations. It's all with the best of intentions. We have the Green Deal objective of 25% of organic products in Europe by, I don't know exactly the year. There is a deforestation directive. There is the maximum residue levels. They are decreased regularly. There is the human rights due diligence directive. There is the corporate social reporting directive, and I'm sure I will forget one or two other directives. And it's all very important, but they all they take time. They require skills. For instance, and then on top of that, there are our customers who want to know about living wages. For instance, living wages is an important issue that we also find very important. But the other side is that it is also very time-consuming, complicated. It's not easy to do. It's not easy for us, and it's not easy for producers. And the effect is that in a world of scarcity, is that producers may tend to sell their produce to other countries than to us, where there is less regulation, where the residue levels are higher, and where there is not this whole plethora, this whole forest of EU regulations. So this is not a judgment on my part, but it's more an observation. So we have some responses to that. We have to deal with these issues. And one of the things is, I spoke about the prices, the costs that we can't pass on easily. I think that a trend is that our customers and also ourselves, we are trying to work more in long-term partnerships. In fact, in our company, we have done that for many years. We work mostly with the same producers, but also our customers, we hear less about, oh, can the price be lower? And we hear more about, can we strike a long-term partnership so that the supply of our product is guaranteed? So customers, they become more concerned about the security of supply and a little bit less about the pricing. I think that is a good, also a good development. It also makes it possible to invest in sustainability, to invest in living wages. If you have a long-term partnership, this all becomes more feasible to implement. In the same way, economic shocks, I put this picture on the screen because why is it a special picture? Because it is very seldom that you see a container ship with no containers on top of it. That is also a situation that that needs to be avoided, but it is It is an effect of economic shocks, of the Corona crisis, of petroleum prices crisis, sometimes of congestion in ports. This is all leading to economic shocks, to less security of supply. And that is also why we need we need more understanding and more long-term partnerships, also when it comes to logistics. I said something about climate change, about quality, weather effects affecting quality. One of the things that we in our company have developed is we try to use artificial intelligence. This is a very complicated picture. This is a poster that we presented at a conference. What we do is we do a lot of quality control here on arrival. And what we have done is we have tried to correlate that, to make a relation between weather events in the countries of production and quality effects that we find here on arrival in Europe. And we found that, in fact, there is a very strong relation between temperature and rainfall and the incidence of some important quality defects. And this tool helps us, this artificial intelligence tool helps us to predict the incidence of these problems. And why is it interesting to predict? Because if we predict it, we can also mitigate it. We can also do something. We can use, as you see here, a controlled atmosphere container where the level of oxygen is lower and the carbon dioxide is higher. And this reduces the incidence of the problem, but it's much more expensive. So this helps us to reduce costs and to deploy those special containers only when they're most needed. And also we can tell our customers when we expect some quality problems so that they need to be more careful with what they, with the ripening. That's basically what I had to say in a nutshell, or in a banana skin. So I hope that it gave you some ideas of the practical life of a banana importer these days. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation, and that confirms actually some of the findings of research, and that's why it's so important to have the operators, because that's the ones that daily have to deal with that. So of course, thanks for reminding the cost of inputs and how this affects and always affects much more negatively, of course, the small producers, even though in your work of fair trade and so on, the price, I mean, at least you make efforts to protect the smallholders. Again, the labor shortages that we see in many, of course, of the sectors, but in agriculture is particularly important. Even in Europe, it's really a problem to not only to find labor, but also, to maintain it, and maintain it with the right skills and, quality and understanding. You mentioned the regulations and each time changing. And we see as well from southern countries, a lot of shift actually to other markets than the EU markets. And this, of course, is to do as well with the regulations. Also, the EU market is recognized as a quality one, and perhaps one you can build longer term partnership, which is actually critical on what you have mentioned. So really very, very interesting. I like very much also the reference to the technology, and we have to come back to that and do a more dedicated topics to that as well, artificial intelligence and that. So please ask your questions or bring additional insights in the chat. Our last speaker now, actually we go to Tanzania. Thank you very much for being with us. Simon MLAY, from Chief Program Manager from TAHA in Tanzania. So actually you work in expansion of the company. Is a very, very actually good company. We know it from COLEAD very, very well in terms of leadership, governance, really realizations and so on. You have been working on and contributing to the TAHA transformation on a multi-million-dollar horticultural industry in Tanzania. You work very much as well, and that's why it's so important, on developing policies and procedures which has also strengthened the organization, and the Hans-Willem point as well on the really long-lasting partnership, which is one of the key areas as well to to build some kind of resilience, is diversification, but also a long-lasting partnership. So please, thank you very much for being with us from Tanzania. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Isolina, and good afternoon from Tanzania. I will also just do, thank you very much for the introduction, Isolina. I will go straight to business and present what I've prepared on our perspective as TAHA or as Tanzania, and the challenges and opportunities that we have here in Africa. So I'll quickly take us through an overview of TAHA, Tanzania Horticultural Association, and then a brief outlook, export outlook for Tanzania, and then we'll look at briefly the investment opportunities, and then the key challenges and how these challenges then will be eroding the benefits that we as a country would benefiting from the investment opportunities. Now, when we speak horticulture in Tanzania, we are looking at 6 main value chains. The first is spices and herbs. Roots and tubers is second. Vegetables, fruits, flowers, and cocoa. Cocoa has only been recently added to our portfolio. So we are now dealing with 6 value chains, both fresh and processed products. When you speak of Tanzania, when you speak of TAHA, we have a bit of a complex structure where we have both the development wing, which was the first registered in 2004, and the development wing deals with issues on productivity, where we have a team of agronomists promoting good agricultural practices, increasing production and productivity for the member farmers. We also deal with business enabling environment, where we look at policy issues, drawing, consulting our members and writing policy briefs to present to the government. We also do access to finance for our members, trade promotion and investment facilitations. And then the third pillar is on market access. Now, on market access is where our 2 commercial companies were born. The first is TAHA Fresh, which is a logistics company that deals with air and sea freighting, tracking, clearing and forwarding, insurance services. And the second company is GreenCert Limited, which is a certification body where they do certification, inspection, and training. Currently, they are offering Global Gap and ISO certificates, but they are also working to be a certification body for the Rainforest Alliance and organic certification. TAHA's approach to development looks at in the entire value chain, where we look at enabling environments, access to finance, access to inputs. We have TAHA information systems where we have both internal and external. For the external, we have the market information system where we collect data 3 times from 28 markets in Tanzania and Kenya. And we use this to kind of try and predict trends and changes in market prices and to be able to advise farmers on when to grow their crops to be able to meet the best prices, but also on where to sell their produce to be able to attain the best prices. But this is within the 2 countries, Kenya and Tanzania. We also deal in infrastructure, where we have worked with government and other development partners to build markets. We do promote better use of water through promoting precision irrigation and things on solar, just to be able to conserve the environment. We have a very strong, we have, I would say, a weak point for women and youth, where we try to develop specialized programs to be able to promote them and help them, raise them to be able to better compete in the horticultural industry in Tanzania. Issues on climate change, and biodiversity, extension services through our agronomists. We also work with government extension officers, and we have community-based facilitators with whom we also train, build capacity, and then send them out to cascade the knowledge and information to the farmers. And then issues on market access, where we participate in various trade fairs to be able to link off-takers in Tanzania to potential buyers in the various countries in Europe, Asia, and also we deal with logistics through our company, TAHA Fresh. Now, a quick overview on the market, export market for Tanzania as of 2023. We managed to export about 64 million kilograms, 64,000 tons, worth 410 million of horticultural produce. And the three main destinations are the Netherlands, India, and Zambia. Of course, Netherlands takes up the bigger chunk of it, and then Zambia and India almost sharing. And then the top 5 export crops that we do, the leader is avocado, where we exported a value of about 73 million USD, followed by cocoa beans, and then we have French beans. Seaweed also, especially from Zanzibar, and then plantain banana. And it is very interesting to hear from Jeremy how to hear on how plantain is gaining traction in the global market. So in Tanzania also, it's catching up very fast. There's a lot of land being opened up, and very soon I think plantain banana and avocados will be going head to head on the export volumes and values from Tanzania. Now, quickly, just a brief on the investment opportunities in production of horticultural crops from Tanzania. We have investment opportunities in production of horticultural crops. And looking at avocados, yes, we are doing quite good, but still there's a potential annual growth of 20%, still very high. We have mangoes with an annual growth of 2%, and this is because we still haven't gotten it right on availing the right seedlings for mangoes. Pineapples still has a potential growth of 4%, spices and herbs at 3%. But also there is investment opportunities in packing materials, especially biodegradables. This is the need for packing materials is very high, because as of August 2024, exports of horticultural crops stood at 454 million USD, yet over 60 to 70% of packing materials for these crops were imported. Now, all these are adding up to the cost of doing business in Tanzania. So when an exporter sends their produce to the global market, their prices will be slightly higher than the others, because access to these materials is still very high. Investment in infrastructure and financial services, where potentially someone could invest in financial loan packages for horticultural farm equipment, and also on smart farming equipment and services. And then also investments generally in inputs, greenhouses, seeds, biological control agents, and the rest. Now, with all these investment opportunities that we have, still there is a lot of challenges that faces market access, and also compounded by the geopolitical issues that are ongoing. The very first challenge that exporters or off-takers face coming off of Tanzania or of East Africa, I would say in general, the very first is the cost of logistics, very, very high. You'll see some potential competitors like, the Peru and Ecuador and the rest. They have a comparative advantage due to being in close proximity to lucrative markets, and they have more efficient systems. when you look at the ongoing wars in the Middle East, these have elongated the trade route. Initially, produce from East Africa would go through the Suez Canal, but with the ongoing war in Middle East, the Houthi rebels attacking ship, shipping times have increased from the initial 25 to 30 days to more than 45 days. Now, this spells more time on the sea, increased costs that will be charged by the shipping lines. But also, we have had instances where whole containers of avocados were found to have gone bad by the time they reached the destination market, because the harvesting time we hadn't yet financed it. Immediately after the wars started, we were still harvesting at the same maturity levels, but then these have been slightly adjusted, and so we see more of the shipping containers reaching with very fresh avocados and other produce, even through the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa. We also are faced with multiple challenges on cross-border requirements, SPS related challenges and differences in legislations, even within trading blocks. I'll just give a quick example. Ethiopia is part of the East African community, but for an Ethiopian to come, say, to Tanzania, they require to apply for a visa at least 3 weeks before they leave Ethiopia. So you'll see such challenges even in movements of takers and goods is still quite a challenge within the regions, and then it gets even more complicated when it goes out. I was happy to hear that there are regular changes, frequent changes in requirements. The MRL levels keeps changing. Requirements in certifications like Global Gap. Initially there was 5.2, version 5.2, but now it's 6, which then requires farmers and off-takers to comply to, and then all these are adding to the costs of doing business and moving fruits and vegetables across borders. But in Tanzania also, we face insufficient produce handling facilities in country. The cold chain systems, still very few, quite small, and not enough to serve the increasing demand. Collection centers also very few and sparse. Pack houses, very few, and most of them are manual. So this requires more time in packing, say, bananas or avocados. The ports in Tanzania are still very highly inefficient, forcing exporters to use neighboring ports in Tanzania. The schedules of ships in Tanzania that dock in Tanzania are not clear. So you could go anywhere from the time that you were given, the time that the ship was slated to leave port, and it could go even up to 2 weeks late. So all these, instead of taking that risk, most of the exporters prefer to use the Mombasa port for their produce. Though the airports are starting to improve, and we see reverse demand now from Kenya, we see most exporters coming to use the Kilimanjaro International Airport. But for the sea, it's still very, very unpredictable. And I've already spoken to the wars in the Middle East, so I'll just go on ahead.
2 minutes,
another challenge.
2 minutes,
yes.
2 minutes, please.
Yes, sure. Another challenge is the long process in opening up new markets, where phytosanitary protocols may have been signed, but this is followed by lengthy requirements to access particular markets, going up to 3 years at a time. So you find an exporter has already given up their targeting that particular market. And then issues on market access, very few off-takers and unfair engagements between local off-takers and international importers. Compliance issues, very many of them within the country for an exporter to export. And then issues on access to finance by off-takers, especially since most sales contracts require some lead time after delivery. And then the business environment is still very unpredictable. The policies and tax systems in the countries are not clear for off-takers. And then high production costs. So you find the market, you need to supply it, but then productivity is still very low, very expensive. So supplying the particular market is a challenge. And now we have agreed with China and India to start supplying some produce there, and their numbers alone are to about 2.9 billion. We are not sure if we'll be able to meet that demand. So these all affect, these all play into the market challenges that we face. What we are doing, investment promotion, and also building capacity of MSMEs on production and value addition, sector improvement by bringing in the right seed varieties and technologies, and then starting incubation programs. So Tanzania is leading the implementation of the Horticulture Export Accelerator Program in collaboration with the Tanzanian Embassy to be able to build muscles of our off-takers. And we have a point person in the UK who will also be doing market intelligence surveys for Tanzanian horticultural produce. And then also housing the Tanzanian chapter of the COMESA EAC Horticulture Accelerator and setting up practical training centers to expose farmers on commercial farming practices and management. So I think briefly that is my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Simon. Very interesting. And we see how you battle in different fronts. I mean, on capacity building, on informing. Of course, the problems you have in Tanzania are the ones we have mentioned before, but sometimes exacerbated, of course. But you are really putting in place a lot of diversification strategies, new markets. You are in a region as well where logistics have been a lot of disruption. Also wars, you have a lot of conflicts in that region which do not help you, but I like the capacity building programs and information on regulations and of course information on new markets as well. We have just 10 minutes to go, but I see as well in the chat that there is appreciation but not many questions because I think it's all quite clear. It's data, and it's also people really telling what the enterprise does in the country and how they cope with it. So I think they cope quite well when we see their growth actually and their markets. There is a specific one, of course, on African mangoes. Why we didn't mention the production? I'm sure that the colleagues from OECD can share data. I mean, on the specific mango situation, and we can follow up on that. For Mr. van der Waal, I mean, you have a bit on the export to New Zealand, South Korea, and so on, or Asia, and how these, how you can manage that with the carbon footprint. And also a bit on I mean, anybody interested can reply as well from the speakers, all the artificial intelligence, future in the fruit and vegetable value chain, it's already there. But I mean, how could this, because this is also links, of course, to some predominant countries evolving there as well. It's not kind of anybody that starts on artificial intelligence as well. And anything each of you wants to add on any of the topics discussed. So perhaps I start with the same order. Laura, please. If you have anything you want to add or...
S'il n'y a pas des questions de choses spécifiques dans la chat. Après, c'est compliqué de faire la picture globale de la géopolitique en 10 minutes. Mais voilà, si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas à me contacter. De toute façon, il y aura mon adresse et je serai heureuse de vous répondre. Pas de souci.
Thank you so much. There is also an additional one, of course, on the living wages and the strategies. Of course, we have heard about AgroFair and how they manage that, but not all companies can do that. Dr. ADENÄUER, anything to add?
Not much particularly. I really enjoyed this session. I learned a lot from the other presenters as well. Maybe on this question on why mangoes have not been mentioned on Africa, I think I have not written that chapter, but we have a limited space there and we concentrate on major exporters, major producers. And yeah, maybe that slipped through at that point. But I can give that recommendation for the next time. Thank you.
Absolutely. We can follow up with very detailed statistics from OECD and COLEAD. Hans-Willem, you had a few questions. Of course, the one on price as well. You have already shown what you do from your side, which is quite impressive. But please.
Yeah, I saw here the question about the carbon footprint for New Zealand and Korea. Yeah, it's not in our capacity to change the location of New Zealand or any other country in the world. So yeah, it is there, and if they want to eat a banana, the banana needs to be shipped. But I can assure you, the banana is not passing through Rotterdam, so it's going more or less direct from Ecuador, Peru, through Panama, and then Panama is a hub, and then it goes over the Pacific Ocean to New Zealand or to Asia. Having said that, carbon footprints, carbon emissions are important. Important part of they are an important part of shipping. It's all fueled by fuel, by petroleum. I think shipping lines that we work with, they are very keen on seeing how they can reduce carbon emissions. Some already doing tests with synthetic methanol, or ships on ammonia, or on as an intermediate step on natural gas. I think we're going to see important developments in that direction in the next years. But having said that, the carbon footprint of a banana is not significantly higher than the carbon footprint of an apple. So kilo apple, kilo bananas, there's not much difference, and they are much better than a kilo of meat. So I would say eat bananas or apples. Was there anything else?
There was the one actually on price, but you had already mentioned that. And the artificial intelligence, it was more for the others, because you had mentioned already.
Yes. Artificial intelligence is already there. It's a lot used for quality control in avos and mangoes, and those machines using near infrared. But I think that we can do much more with artificial intelligence, or with machine learning. Artificial intelligence, it sounds a little bit magical, but a lot of it is machine learning, which is advanced statistics, and you need fast computers for it. But there is one but. For machine learning or artificial intelligence to work, you need very good data. Good data, a lot of data, and well-structured data. So it is, if you don't have that, don't expect much.
It's another area in itself, I mean, of going with capacities and skills and data as for the production and the rest we have mentioned today. On the miles as well is an effort of everybody. And I do remember many studies we looked at a while ago where it's not because it's far that it's necessarily worse than some of the closer markets as well. It depends on how you produce, you know, how you package, etc., etc. So it's quite a complex, actually, issue. And of course, you have also all the area we did that recently on also processing, adding value, and all the things to, especially to reduce food and waste as well. José, do you have something that you want to add, to ask, to? I don't know, Jeremy as well, if he's there. And very interesting, actually. I've learned a lot.
Thank you, Isolina. And thanks, I mean, to all the presenters. I think it was really useful for us. I think the main topics that keep repeating were, I mean, input costs. I mean, that's for sure a big impact on fruit and vegetables production. Transports, costs, and delays. You know, fruit and vegetables are perishable goods, so it's crucial, I mean, to ensure that they arrive time to avoid food waste, for example. I like a lot also the discussion about the climate change impact, for example, particularly on the quality. We at OECD, we work, you know, we have our fruit and vegetable scheme. And lately we have been discussing a lot legislation and how climate change is impacting the fruit and vegetables quality. So, you know, there's standards that regulate the quality of fruit and vegetables. There's a lot of resistance to acknowledge that climate change has a direct impact on the quality of fruit and vegetables. So I like a lot Hans-Willem presentation about how they mention that clearly climate change has an impact, not only on production, but on the quality of fruit and vegetables. And I'm sure we will discuss that later on at a governmental level to try to convince them that regulation needs to take into account climate change and how that has direct impacts on quality of produce. So again, thanks to COLEAD, to all the speakers, and to all those who were listening to these presentations, and I hope they have been useful for all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, José. Before Jeremy, Simon, you wanted to add something on the, because you were the last one to speak, so I think you covered quite well.
Yes, Isolina, thank you. I think I covered everything that I had to speak. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much. So Jeremy, you want to add something?
Very, very briefly, Isolina, I would like to thank, of course, all the panelists for these very insightful presentations. Two things that I would like to highlight, bouncing back on José's comments and Hans-Willem's presentation. The compounded effect really of I mean, today's topic was really about the market disruptions and geopolitical events. But as mentioned during the introductions, I mean, let's not forget that one of the #1 disruptions and events at the moment is climate change, especially affecting production. And so you really have a compounding effect there. And #2, although the angle to talk about data was around artificial intelligence, we firmly believe also at COLEAD that beyond artificial intelligence, if we're not able during the next coming years to improve our entire work, and when I say our entire work, it's within the ecosystem and value chains on data, we will not be able to fully measure, fully understand what's taking place, and we will not be able eventually to be fully effective in building resilience. And so data is absolutely fundamental, and we are encountering some big issues around that at the moment because of the lack of reliability of the data. And so at all levels, macro, meso, micro, so it's at all levels. And so we absolutely need to be able to be more precise on that front. I'll finish on that.
Absolutely. So thank you very much. It's just 1 minute after the time foreseen. It was so rich that actually, you know, it's all contributions and learning for all of us. So I can only thank you very much as well from the research side and from the practice side that also use research, of course. It was really fascinating. It's just a beginning of the conversation because it has many dimensions, as all of you have said. So in the coming sessions that you will receive, of course, by email, yes, we will have deep dives on each of them. So keep well. Thanks for the people, same numbers, more than 100 until the end. I'm very impressed from all over the world. Thank you very much. Thank you to the presenters again. Thank you to the interpreters for allowing us this discussion. And thank you, of course, for the COLEAD and OECD teams. Keep well and see you soon, and more by email. All will be shared. Thank you very much.
Thank you. A pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Simon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you to the interpreters. Thank you, Isolina. Thank you.